You've had a wonderful career then that spanned the rise and rise of computational biology. What is Swiss Prot? How could you explain that to people who are not familiar with it, and why do we need databases?
Okay, so Swiss Prot was set up in 1986, and I think by Angus Lamond in Geneva. And he was one of the early computational scientists, except the word wasn't even invented then. So he wanted protein sequences so he could run programs around them to try and figure out the structures and the functions. But there was no such resource. There was a PIR in the States, but that was a book, which seems really crazy now. So he took PIR and put it into a flat file database, which we could talk many hours about. But he started out, and I think it was 1989 maybe, or even sooner, that he reached out to Graham Cameron at the Data Library in Heidelberg, and the collaboration began then. So the whole idea was to make the sequences and any information from the literature that was known about the function of the proteins available to everyone around the world. It seems a bit crazy now that you had to go to a library, you had to get books, you had to read all the papers, and a lot of countries couldn't afford that, and a lot of universities, even in relatively rich countries, couldn't afford the full scope. Even on campus at the EBI, with the Sanger Centre next door, Cambridge University right next door, we still don't have access to all the journals, and that's a first-class research facility. So that was the idea. So it seems, again, crazy now, but you had a bunch of people sitting down, reading every paper they could get their hands on about a particular protein, and then entering it in a structured manner. It became far more structured over time. At the beginning, it was a bit too much free French, English, but it evolved over time, and it became a huge resource. And I think there's no one in the world now that doesn't use it in one way or another. They might not know they are. A lot of companies, for instance, take the freely available data and reformat it and sell it on. Others, companies just bring it in-house and provide it to their researchers in different ways. But it's definitely a global resource, and that's reflected in all the funding it attracted over the years.
What's your own feeling about the impact of artificial intelligence on the future of database curation and delivery of services via EBI? And I can't help noticing that while you've done this wonderful job at EMBL-EBI of keeping it an open resource, the fantastic advance of AlphaFold did come out of a commercial organization, and so there's always the specter of could this suddenly change if you become wholly dependent on the largesse of commercial organizations that ultimately are answerable to their shareholders?
Yeah, but I think something that has not been talked about enough is the fact that AlphaFold was built, trained on the manual annotation in Swiss Prot and PDB.
Yes.
That was done by humans. And we have an expression, garbage in, garbage out. If the curators hadn't put in that data in the way that they did, and it evolved over time, like I mentioned earlier, it started out as free text, and then over the years we revolutionized that, so it became particular items of information and evidence attribution put next to it. And that's really, really important. It was one of the joys for me that we can make a distinction between, and this is what we do as scientists, this is a fact, and this is a prediction. And there's nothing wrong with making predictions, but make sure everybody knows it's a prediction and not a fact. And AlphaFold was able to build on decades of hard work of curators from all over the world contributing that data, and people in the labs doing the original science. And that's another key thing. there's not enough beautiful biochemistry being done in the labs. You have to have the experiments that prove things. And I could see and I had this discussion with the NIH, so many of the papers that you read now, there aren't facts that a curator can take out. They've got a paper published. Like if the papers I was reading in the early 90s, okay, it could have represented 5 years of work for a particular researcher, but it was beautiful biochemistry. There were facts to be gathered. There was things to be said. Now there's so many papers, you get to the end of it and go, and nada, nothing that I could use. I'm sure somebody found it helpful, but advanced science, not so much. So I love AlphaFold. I think it's great. It can see the big picture. And Lord save us, someone really needs to do something to push on protein structure, because we've been working on this a long time without progressing very far. It's another thing I'm interested in. But you will always have to have the humans involved to make sure that the initial seeds, AI is not going to come up with that initial information. They can build on it and present it back. And that's great, because then one of the reasons why I was so involved in the computational side right at the beginning from EMBL, it was like some of the stuff I was doing, I was like, a trained monkey could do this. I want to use my brain. And I think that's where we're going to evolve over time. And I welcome it, because we couldn't keep up. I mean, I think Uniprot has 100 people working on it now. You can't keep expanding. Like you can't manage a bigger team than that. So you need to get better tools involved. And that's where I really see something like, AI contributing. There is more than enough work for all of us.
So are you confident then of the future of bioinformatics and data repositories? Will they remain open access resources that will be well funded by the taxpayer and provide these great resources going forward?
I think we have to keep making sure that the decision makers understand that. I think the EBI has done a great job and EMBL as a whole has done a great job of convincing member states initially, and to keep thinking EMBL is a great thing to have, and that the resources should be freely available. I think there will always be challenges. So many times, like I'm still in touch with my colleagues at the EBI and NCBI and all the rest, because friendships. We've been through this before. When funding is cut, we have to close things down, we have to retrench, and then you go through the process and the latest big thing that was supposed to solve all the problems doesn't actually work. And you come back to this has delivered, over-delivered for decades already. Keep investing in this, you won't lose out. And the thing is, like I mentioned, we enabled AlphaFold. Benefit from us. It's not like we're closing ourselves down and we only do things one way. That's the whole benefit. We're enabling you to build on what we are, but we will still keep evolving and keep delivering and over-delivering.